My own family forced me to serve cake like a maid, but my son's words silenced the room. My name is Heather. I'm a mother to a sweet little boy named Max, and I've always tried to be kind to others, no matter what. But there are moments in life when kindness is taken for granted, and that's exactly what happened to me by my own family. I lived in a small town called Maple Ridge, a quiet place where nothing much ever happened. But when it did, oh, it was big. It started like any other family gathering. The usual group, my sister Rachel, her husband George, and my brother Ben. It was a Sunday, and we had all gathered at my parents' house for a family reunion. The smell of food filled the air, and everyone seemed to be in high spirits. I had made a beautiful cake for the occasion, a classic chocolate cake with cream cheese frosting that I had spent hours perfecting. It was supposed to be a fun, relaxing day until it all went downhill. I was standing in the kitchen, finishing up the final touches on the cake, when Rachel walked in. Her eyes quickly scanned the room, and she glanced at me with that look. The one that always made me feel like I wasn't doing enough. "Heather," she said in a voice that wasn't exactly friendly, "could you please serve the cake? You know, since you're the one who made it, it'll be easier if you just hand it out." I looked at her, feeling a little taken aback. "Sure, but I thought we were all just going to enjoy the cake together." Rachel didn't even glance up as she began to arrange plates on the table. "Well, it's your cake, so it makes sense, doesn't it? Just serve it like you always do." I didn't know what to say. It felt odd, but I shrugged and agreed. As I made my way to the living room, holding the tray with the cake, I noticed George and Ben already sitting on the couch, laughing and joking. Nobody helped set the table or served the food. It was just me. The next few minutes were a blur. I went back and forth, serving pieces of cake to everyone, trying to keep up with the chatter. I had expected a moment of family bonding, but it didn't feel that way at all. As I set down the last piece of cake for my parents, Rachel turned to me again, her voice dripping with that same unspoken command. "Why don't you stay and chat with us, Heather? Maybe you should sit down for a bit," she suggested in that tone that told me exactly what she meant. You know, like a maid. That stung. I felt my cheeks redden. I had always been the one to do things for others, but this was the first time I had ever felt so invisible. I stood there holding the tray, trying to mask the hurt that was swelling inside me. Max, my 6-year-old son, was sitting beside me. I could feel his little hand tugging at my dress. "Mom, you're not a maid," he said in a loud whisper, his words cutting through the awkward silence. Everyone at the table fell silent. Rachel and George exchanged a quick glance, but I noticed Ben's lips twitching as though he was trying not to laugh. "Well, I started to say, trying to regain my composure, but Max wasn't finished. "You're my mommy, and you shouldn't have to do everything for them," he continued, his innocent voice ringing clear and strong. It was as though the room froze. Rachel and George exchanged glances again. Their eyes narrowed, but it was clear that Max's words had landed in a way I hadn't expected. I saw a flicker of something in Rachel's face, a moment of recognition, maybe even guilt, before she quickly covered it up with a fake smile. She cleared her throat. "Max," she said, her voice soft, "your mom is a good sister, isn't she? She helps us a lot." I forced a smile and nodded. "Yes, I help when I can, but today's not about me, it's about family." But deep inside, I was boiling. I couldn't believe how easily they took advantage of me. The truth was, Rachel had always pushed me around, and I had let her. I had spent my life trying to keep the peace, trying to be the good sister, the one who didn't rock the boat. But today was different. Max's words had ignited something in me, something I hadn't realized was there. I took a deep breath and placed the tray down on the coffee table, with a little more force than I intended. The sound was louder than I wanted it to be, but it felt good. Rachel raised an eyebrow at me. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I turned to Max, who was looking up at me with wide eyes, clearly aware that something was changing. "Max, would you like some more cake?" I asked, suddenly feeling a sense of pride in the way he stood up for me. He nodded eagerly. "Yes, please." I walked back into the kitchen, trying to ignore the silent tension that filled the room. My mind was racing. I had been pushed to the edge, and now I had a choice to make. I could keep letting them walk all over me, or I could finally do something about it. Max's words had been the wake-up call I needed. As I reached for another slice of cake, I couldn't help but smile to myself. This day wouldn't end like the others. I wasn't going to be the quiet, invisible sister anymore, but I wasn't ready to let them know yet. No, I needed time to think, time to plan, and the perfect opportunity would present itself soon. The room was still silent when I walked back in, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. I wasn't sure if anyone had noticed my change, but I could feel it in my bones. I was no longer just the sister who did everything for everyone else. Now I was someone who would make them listen. And that was just the beginning. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Everyone had stopped eating and was staring at me in one way or another. I didn't care. In that moment, I was more focused on my son, Max. His innocent words had given me the strength I didn't know I had. It was as if he had awakened something deep inside of me, a feeling I had buried for far too long. I placed the cake on the coffee table with more authority than I intended. Everyone could see the shift in me, even if they didn't want to admit it. Max smiled up at me, his big brown eyes gleaming with pride. My heart swelled. He didn't understand the full weight of the situation, but he knew enough to see when things weren't right. "Is everyone done?" I asked, breaking the silence. My voice was calm, but there was something behind it, something different that made Rachel pause mid-bite. Yeah," Rachel said, clearing her throat awkwardly. "I think we're all good." But there was something in her tone, a slight shift that I didn't miss. She was trying to cover up the discomfort, but it was there. They were all uncomfortable. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. Something inside me told me that if I kept playing the nice, quiet sister, nothing would change. This was my moment to take control, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. Max, still sitting beside me, shifted in his seat and looked at everyone in the room. "Mom, you don't have to keep doing everything for them," he said again, his words clear and loud, as if to reinforce what he had said earlier. I was proud of him. He was teaching me how to stand up for myself. But I also knew that the others wouldn't just let it go. I had to be careful with how I handled this. They would try to push me back into my old role, the one where I quietly took orders and did everything without complaint. But I wasn't that person anymore. Rachel's smile wavered. "Max, you need to understand that your mom is just being helpful," she said, trying to downplay it. But Max wasn't having it. "No, she's not," he retorted, his voice innocent but firm. "She's always doing things for you guys. Why doesn't anyone ever do things for her?" The room fell silent again, and for a moment no one spoke. It was as if Max had exposed something that none of them wanted to admit, but all of them knew was true. I could see Rachel's eyes flicker with a mixture of frustration and embarrassment. George, sitting beside her, shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. I wasn't sure where this new boldness in Max had come from, but I felt a surge of pride. He was right. They took advantage of me, and now they were starting to realize it. But before I could say anything, Ben, my brother who had been silent through most of the exchange, spoke up. "Come on, Heather," he said, his tone dismissive. "It's just a cake. We're all family. You know how it is. No need to make a big deal out of this." I clenched my fists, feeling the old familiar sting of being belittled. They thought they could dismiss it, just like that, without facing the truth. But I wasn't going to let that happen anymore. "I think it is a big deal," I said, my voice calm but carrying a weight of finality. "I've been doing everything for all of you for years, and I'm tired of it. It's time for things to change." I saw the surprise in their faces. They weren't expecting that from me. Rachel, especially, looked taken aback. She had always assumed I would just keep doing things, always putting others before myself. But this time, it wasn't going to be so easy. "Are you saying you won't help anymore?" she asked, her voice sharp now. I looked her straight in the eye. "I'm saying I won't be taken for granted anymore. If you want something, you can ask, but I'm not going to be your servant." There was a long pause, and I could see the tension in the room building. Rachel's eyes narrowed, and I knew she wasn't happy. This wasn't the Heather she knew, the quiet one who always bent over backward for her. This Heather was different, and I could tell it rattled her. Max, still sitting beside me, looked up at me with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "you're really brave." His words were like a balm to my soul. He believed in me. And for the first time in years, I was starting to believe in myself too. But just as I thought things might settle down, Rachel spoke again. "Fine," she said, standing up and throwing her napkin on the table. "If that's the way you want to be, Heather, maybe we don't need you here today. We can manage just fine without you." I felt the sting of her words, but I didn't let it show. She was trying to push me away, to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. But I wouldn't let her win. Not this time. Max grabbed my hand, his little fingers squeezing tightly around mine. "Mom, let's leave," he said. His words weren't loud, but they were clear, and they cut through the tension in the room like a knife. I stood up, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. "You know what, Max? I think you're right. Let's go." Rachel, her face red with anger, stood there frozen as I turned to leave. George, still silent, looked at me, but I could see the discomfort in his eyes. Ben didn't say anything either, but I could feel his gaze on me as I walked out the door with Max by my side. As we stepped outside into the cool evening air, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had done it. I had stood up for myself. And the best part, I hadn't backed down. But as we walked down the path to our car, I could hear the faint sound of Rachel's voice, raised in anger behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The damage had been done. And I knew deep down that things between us would never be the same again. But this was only the beginning. The storm was just getting started. The drive home was quiet at first. Max sat in the back seat, looking out the window, his fingers playing with the zipper on his jacket. I glanced at him through the rearview mirror, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened pressed down on my shoulders. But I also felt light, like I had dropped a 1,000-pound load I had carried for years. "Mom," Max finally said, his voice soft. "Are you mad at me?" I nearly pulled the car over right then. "No, sweetie," I said quickly, my heart aching. "Why would you think that?" He shrugged. I said something and it made everyone quiet. Aunt Rachel looked mad. I took a deep breath. "You told the truth, Max. And sometimes when people hear the truth, it makes them uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean it was wrong. I'm proud of you for speaking up." A smile crept onto his face. "I'm proud of you too, Mom." Those words made everything worth it. When we got home, I poured Max some juice and heated up his favorite mac and cheese. We sat on the couch and watched his favorite cartoon for a while. I let the laughter of the characters and the clinking of his spoon distract me from the flood of emotions in my chest. I was angry. I was tired. But more than anything, I was awake. Wide awake. That night, after Max went to bed, I sat down with my old notebook. I hadn't touched it in years. It was the one I used to write in before I became too busy taking care of everyone else. I flipped through the pages, seeing lists of dreams, business ideas, things I wanted to learn. I had forgotten this version of me. A small sticky note was still there on the first page. My handwriting, faded but strong. "You're not just here to serve. You're here to shine." That night, something shifted inside me, something deep and long buried. The next morning, I got a message from Ben. Just one line. "Rachel says you owe her an apology for storming out." I stared at the screen for a full minute, blinking in disbelief. "No, are you okay? No, what happened?" Just a demand for an apology I didn't owe. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I got Max ready for school, dropped him off, and came back home with one plan in mind. I was going to take my power back. The first thing I did was dig out the old resume I'd saved in a folder deep on my laptop. I hadn't worked outside of small side gigs since Max was born. But I had skills, I had drive, and I wasn't going to wait for anyone to offer me space anymore. I was going to make my own. By noon, I had updated my resume and applied to 3 remote jobs. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and each click felt like another brick laid in the foundation of my freedom. But the calm didn't last. Later that evening, I picked up Max from school, and we stopped by a grocery store for a few things. As we walked down the cereal aisle, I saw her. Rachel. She was with her friend Karen. One of those women who always looked like she just walked out of a magazine cover, even when she was buying toilet paper. The moment Rachel saw me, she didn't hesitate to raise her voice. "Oh, look who it is," she said loud enough for the entire aisle to hear. "Heather, the drama queen, here to buy snacks with that victim complex." Max gripped my hand tightly. My stomach turned, but I forced a calm smile on my face. "Hey, Rachel," I said, cool as ice. Karen looked between us, sensing something deeper but clearly entertained. "You disappeared pretty fast yesterday," Rachel continued. "But I guess that's what happens when someone can't handle being called out." "Called out?" I asked, eyebrows raised. "You mean for finally realizing I'm not your maid?" Rachel's smirk dropped for a split second before she plastered it back on. "Don't play the martyr. Nobody asked you to do anything. You just offered like you always do." "No," I said, stepping a little closer. "You never ask, Rachel. You expect. There's a difference. And I'm done playing along." People were starting to turn their heads toward us. Rachel saw the attention and quickly pulled her cart around Karen, muttering, "Whatever. Just don't come crawling back when you realize you need." But I wasn't going to need her. That was the difference now. I walked away with Max, feeling my heart beat hard in my chest. I had never confronted Rachel like that in public. Ever. And even though my hands were shaking, I knew I had taken one more step towards something bigger, something more powerful than anything I'd felt in years. That night, something even more unexpected happened. Max handed me a folded piece of paper he'd written at school. It was for a project called My Hero. I opened it slowly, expecting to see the name of some athlete or cartoon character. But there it was. My hero is my mom because she's brave. She doesn't let people push her around, even when it's hard. She stands up even when people are mean. She's teaching me to be strong. I couldn't stop the tears. I cried right there at the kitchen table. This wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It was about showing Max what strength looks like. Real strength. The kind that doesn't roar, but stands firm. But things were only just starting to shift. Because what I didn't know, what Rachel didn't realize, was that I had a plan. One that had been growing slowly inside me since I walked out of her house that day. And that plan, it was going to flip the whole script. I was going to give them exactly what they thought they wanted. And then I would take everything back, in a way they never saw coming. But the first move, that would happen at the next family gathering. Because this time when I showed up, I wasn't coming to serve. I was coming to make them watch me rise. And I had already sent Rachel a message agreeing to attend. She didn't know what was coming. None of them did. The day of the family barbecue arrived faster than I expected. Rachel had planned it as a makeup gathering, though I knew better. It was her way of reasserting control, of trying to make me crawl back, pretend everything was fine, and go right back to fetching lemonade, while she sat on the porch, laughing with her wine glass in hand. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. That morning, I took my time. I made Max his favorite breakfast, banana pancakes with whipped cream, and we laughed as he got syrup on his nose. I wore my new dress. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it was mine. A soft green wrap dress that hugged my waist and made me feel like I mattered. And I brought something extra to the party. I carried it in a plain brown box, with no label, tucked neatly in my arms, like it was no big deal. Max held my hand as we walked up the driveway of Rachel's big 2-story house in Autumn Vale Hills, the kind of suburban neighborhood where everyone's lawn looks like it's cut with scissors. Ben met us at the front door. He looked nervous. "Heather," he said, forcing a smile. "Glad you made it." I smiled right back. Of course, family right. He blinked, unsure whether to be relieved or worried. Inside the house was already full. People chatting, kids running around, plates clinking. I saw Rachel standing in the kitchen, wearing a pastel blue sundress, and her usual smug expression. When she spotted me, she raised her eyebrows, like she was surprised I showed up. But I didn't go to see her. I walked straight to the dining table, and placed the brown box in the center. "What's that?" Aunt Brenda asked, eyeing it suspiciously. I gave her a smile. "You'll see. I wasn't here to blend in anymore. They tried to make me invisible, but this time, I was going to make them look right at me." Max went off to play with his cousins, and I stood in the corner sipping sweet tea, watching the way people gravitated to Rachel like she was the queen bee. She loved being in charge, which was exactly why my plan would sting. An hour passed. Everyone was settled now. Plates were full, drinks were flowing, and the sun was beginning to set. That's when Rachel clinked her glass. "All right, everyone, let's gather around and bring out the cake." "Heather," she called, voice sweet and sharp like honey over glass. "Since you're here, and we know how good you are with presentation, can you do the honors and serve the cake for us?" Laughter sprinkled around the room. It was subtle, but I heard it. There it was again. The expectation. The unspoken command wrapped in fake politeness. I stared at her for a long, silent moment. Then I walked toward the table. Gasps filled the room as I opened the brown box, not to reveal a cake, but rows of neatly stacked envelopes. Dozens of them. I picked one up and handed it to Rachel with a smile. "What is this?" she asked, confused. "Read it," I said. She opened the envelope and began reading. Her face paled almost instantly. She tried to speak, but I stopped her. "Don't worry. Everyone's getting one." I handed them out like party favors, one by one. Aunt Brenda, Uncle Wayne, even Karen, Rachel's shadow, got one. Each envelope contained the same thing, a detailed letter exposing everything I had done for each of them over the years. Every chore, every time I babysat for free, every ride I gave, every favor I wasn't thanked for, every weekend I cooked, cleaned, helped. And at the bottom, a bold sentence: "From now on, I will no longer be available for any unpaid labor, emotional support, or one-sided relationships. If you need something, feel free to hire help, like everyone else does. This is your notice. I resign from being your family servant." The room went dead silent. You could hear a fork drop. Rachel stood frozen, still holding the letter, her mouth slightly open. Aunt Brenda squinted at hers, then gasped, "Is this some kind of joke?" I smiled. "Not at all. I'm just giving everyone a little clarity." "You're being dramatic," Rachel said finally, her voice shaking. "No," I said calmly. I've just finally realized that being kind and being a doormat aren't the same thing. I was trying to be a good sister, a good niece, a good everything, and in return I got treated like help. Ben stepped forward, rubbing the back of his neck. Heather, come on. You're blowing this way out of. No, Ben, I said, cutting him off. I was quiet when Rachel made me serve cake like a maid. I was quiet when you told me to apologize for her behavior, but not anymore. I don't owe any of you anything. Rachel looked like she was about to explode. You think you're better than us now? I shook my head. No, I just finally know my worth. That's when Max walked into the room, holding a small paper crown from the kids' table. He looked around, then walked up beside me. He placed the crown gently on my head. She's not a maid, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. She's my mom, and she's the strongest person here. More silence, then the smallest gasp. That moment, it was the one that shook the whole room. They couldn't laugh that off. They couldn't pretend that didn't hit them. I placed my hand on Max's shoulder, looked around at every stunned face in the room, and said, "Enjoy the cake. Someone else can serve it." And with that, I walked out the door with Max, the paper crown still sitting gently on my head. But what they didn't know was that my revenge wasn't over. Because while they were still standing there stunned, the second phase of my plan had already begun. And the next move, it would hit closer to home than any of them expected. The morning after the barbecue, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not the kind that screams or slams doors. Not the kind that needs attention. It was the quiet kind. The kind that comes from finally knowing you don't need anyone's permission to live your own life. But for my family, that moment at the barbecue was just the start. Because what none of them realized yet was that while I was just the maid in their eyes, I'd spent years paying attention, silently gathering details, stories, and secret. Not to gossip, not to hurt, just in case. And now, that case was open. Max and I were back home, and I was making waffles when I got the first call. Rachel. Of course, I didn't pick up. She called again. Then a text came through. "We need to talk. Now." I smiled and put my phone on silent. Let her stew. Because the thing is, when people are used to taking from you, your silence is the loudest noise they've ever heard. By mid-afternoon, it started. Aunt Brenda posted a vague status online about ungrateful people biting the hand that feeds them. Karen commented something snide about family drama with a laughing emoji. I didn't respond. I didn't post anything. Instead, I took a slow walk to the library and printed 30 copies of something I'd been working on in secret for months. A family memoir. More like a project, really. Nothing fancy, just a collection of memories, family stories and photos, old ones from my parents, our childhood, even the times we all laughed together before things got ugly. But here's where it got interesting. In each section, I had included behind-the-scenes commentary, quiet truths, not gossip, just things people forgot or ignored, like how I was the one who paid off Rachel's credit card debt in 2018 when she was 2 months away from defaulting, or how I took care of Grandma for 6 months straight while the others made excuses, or how I lent Ben $3,000 when he got laid off and never asked for it back. It was all there. The photos, the memories, and then truth. I mailed it anonymously to everyone in the family. I called it What Family Really Means. No signature, no return address, but they'd know. Oh, they'd know. That evening, while they were likely flipping through the pages of the quiet bomb I'd dropped, Max and I were building a Lego castle. I was humming to myself when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Rachel standing there. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying, or screaming. "You mailed that thing, didn't you?" I didn't deny it. "Shh. You humiliated me," she hissed. I looked her straight in the eye. "No, I told the truth. What you're feeling isn't humiliation. It's the absence of a lie you've been living under." She stepped inside without asking. I almost laughed, still entitled. "I don't know what you think you're trying to prove," she said, pacing my living room. "You think everyone's just gonna turn on me because of a stupid little book." I sat on the couch and folded my hands calmly. "No, I think they'll see things for how they really are. Maybe for the first time." Rachel stopped pacing. "You're not going to win, Heather." I stood and walked right up to her. "This isn't about winning," I said. "It's about finally being done losing." She flinched. That hit her. "I was just trying to help you fit in," she said quietly. "You've always been the outsider, Heather. I was trying to give you a place." "No," I said. "You were trying to keep me beneath you so you'd never have to feel small."
but guess what? I don't need to fit in anymore. I'm building something new. She stared at me for a moment, like she didn't recognize me anymore. Then she turned and left, slamming the door behind her. Max peeked out from the hallway. Was that Aunt Rachel? Yeah, I said, pulling him close. But don't worry, she's just confused right now. He nodded. Did she see the book? I smiled. She saw it. The next few days were quiet.
Too quiet.
I knew something was coming. The calm before the storm. Then it hit. Late one night, I got a call from a blocked number. When I answered, a woman's voice whispered, "They're planning something. Watch your back." Then the line went dead. I stared at the screen. That wasn't just a warning. It was a promise, and I had no idea what they were planning next. But I was ready, because while they were plotting in the dark, I had one more card to play. And this one, it would change everything. The next morning felt like the world was holding its breath. I didn't know who called me last night, or what they meant, but I knew one thing for sure. My family wasn't done, and they weren't the type to sulk quietly. No, when they lost control, they struck back. Always had. I got Max ready for school, gave him a kiss on the forehead, and watched as the bus disappeared down the street. Then I went inside and locked the door. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, half expecting it to explode with messages or threats. But nothing came, just silence, until the mail arrived. At first glance, it was a regular white envelope with no name on it, just my address, neatly printed. Inside, a single photo. It was an old one, me at 19, sitting on the edge of a hospital bed, holding a newborn Max in my arms. My face was tired, my eyes puffy from crying. I remembered that day like it was yesterday. I had just signed papers giving full custody to my parents, because I couldn't afford to raise him on my own at the time. I didn't think anyone had taken a photo, but someone had. And now they were sending it back to me, like a warning. I flipped it over. On the back was a message, scribbled in messy ink. "We know everything. Let's see what happens when everyone else does." I felt a chill slide down my back. Was this their next move? Dig up my past and try to humiliate me? If so, they were more desperate than I thought. I sat there for a long time, holding the photo, feeling a lump in my throat. I could have cried, but I didn't. I'd cried too much already. I'd spent too many years apologizing for things that weren't sins, just struggles.
Max walked through the door that afternoon with a huge grin on his face. "Mom, guess what?" "What, baby?" "There's a school talent show next week. Can I do something?" "Like, tell a story?" I smiled. "Of course. What kind of story?" He dropped his backpack and sat on the couch. "One about a mom, a strong mom, who never gave up." I blinked, caught off guard. "And I want to wear a suit." "A suit?" "Yeah, because she's the hero and I want everyone to know it." My heart cracked wide open. In the best way, I kissed the top of his head. "Then we'll get you the best suit in town." That night, as he slept, I opened a locked box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were old documents, the ones from when I gave up custody temporarily, and then fought tooth and nail to get it back. Letters from social workers. Notes I wrote to myself when I didn't think I could go on. Proof that I had nothing to be ashamed of, and I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I went straight to the town's community center, where Rachel and Karen were hosting a charity brunch the next weekend. The same brunch where, every year, they smiled in front of cameras and pretended to be saints. I walked in, calm and confident. Rachel spotted me immediately and stiffened. "Are you lost?" she asked, her voice syrupy sweet in front of the volunteers. "Nope," I said. "I'm here to offer a donation. And a surprise." Karen looked me up and down like I was a stain. "You can leave it at the front," she said. I leaned in and whispered, just loud enough for both of them to hear. "Unless you want this to become very public, I suggest you make room for me on the guest list." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "What are you talking about?" I smiled and slipped a folder onto the table between them. Inside were photocopies of the letters they had sent me in the past. Letters asking for help, begging for money, making promises they never kept. All signed, all dated. Karen's hand trembled as she flipped through them. "You're bluffing," Rachel whispered. "Try me," I said. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't need them to agree. I already knew what would happen. They'd scramble, whisper, panic. And then they'd comply. Because the one thing worse than looking bad in front of me was looking bad in front of everyone else. I went home, dressed Max, and made him dinner. We laughed, we played, we danced in the living room to cheesy music. And just when I thought the night would end quietly, my phone buzzed again. It was a photo, a new one, of Max, at school, taken that day. No message, no caption, just the image. My blood ran cold. Someone was watching my son, and I had no idea who it was. But I was about to find out, and when I did, they'd regret ever trying to touch my boy. My hands trembled as I stared at the photo of Max on my phone. It had been taken from a distance, outside his school gates, just as he was lining up with the other kids. The angle told me it wasn't someone random. This was planned, meant to shake me. And it did, but not in the way they thought. This wasn't fear. Not anymore. This was fire. The kind that burns through fear and leaves only purpose behind. I stayed up the entire night, not pacing, not crying, planning. By sunrise, I had printed every message, every threatening photo, every screenshot of cruel texts, and every document from my past that could speak louder than any gossip. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Coach Larry, a retired gym teacher turned community director who now ran youth programs at the local hall. He had been like a father figure to me when mine left. He picked up on the first ring. "Mel? Is that you?" "Yeah, I need a favor." He listened. He didn't question. He just said, "You got it." By noon, a new event had been added to the weekend charity brunch, a special feature called Stories That Built Us, where select guests could come forward and share life journeys meant to inspire the community. Rachel and Karen had no clue I'd be on stage. Not until I walked up to that mic, wearing a fitted navy dress, hair neat, shoulders back. Max sat in the front row wearing his tiny suit, his legs swinging beneath his chair, eyes wide with pride. The hall was full of familiar faces, neighbors, teachers, church friends, even a couple of city council members who had come for the free food and networking. I took the mic, and I began. "My name is Melanie." Some heads turned. I used to think being strong meant staying quiet, being polite, never causing waves. But today I learned that true strength is telling the truth, even when it shakes the room. I paused. My story doesn't start in a mansion. It starts in a hospital room. 19 years old, no money, no family support, just a tiny baby in my arms, and a decision I didn't want to make. You could hear a pin drop. I told them everything, not with shame, but with clarity. The custody, the struggles, the fight to get Max back, the fake love from those who smiled in public but mocked me in private. I spoke about working 3 jobs, cleaning toilets at 2 a.m., eating crackers for dinner, so Max could have warm meals. Then I lifted the folder of documents. These are the receipts, the letters, the proof of who helped and who was hurt. A gasp echoed from the corner. I didn't look their way. I didn't need to. They tried to shame me this week. Send me pictures, threats, even followed my son. Now the gasps grew louder. But let me be clear, this isn't about revenge. This is about exposure. Because when people show you who they are, believe them. And when people try to dim your light, shine brighter. I stepped back. Max stood, and the room rose with him. A full standing ovation. Tears streamed down faces. Some hugged strangers. Even the mayor, who had popped in for a photo op, wiped his eyes. Rachel and Karen were frozen in their seats, pale, speechless. After the event, I didn't say a word to them. I didn't have to. Their silence said it all. The next week, I got a call from the school board. They wanted me to speak to teenage moms at local high schools. A few days after that, a woman knocked on my door. A reporter from the local paper. She'd heard what happened and wanted to publish my story. I agreed on one condition, that they also print Max's short story from the school talent show. He'd written it himself, a story called The Strongest Person I Know, about a mom who served cake like a maid at a party, meant to humiliate her. Until her son reminded everyone who she really was. The piece went viral, not just in our town, but everywhere. And Rachel and Karen, they vanished from public events. Quietly, slowly, like dust swept under a rug. They never apologized, but they didn't have to. The world saw them now, unmasked. As for me, I didn't just reclaim my dignity. I built a platform, and I used it. For every woman who'd ever been treated like furniture at her own table. For every mom told to be quiet and grateful while being stepped on. And every child who saw his mother stand tall and decided to rise beside her. That was my revenge. But more importantly, that was my redemption.